Hi everyone, my name is Elena. My Instagram name is Ellen Sham and I'm lifestyle and travel photographer. My style is quite diverse. I shoot a bit of London, architecture, different interesting interiors. I also love a good flatlay and I love traveling. In this particular video, we'll be focusing on flatlays. I normally do flatlays two ways. I use my camera and I use my iPhone. So if I'm shooting for a client for a particular project, I normally would use my camera on a tripod to get high resolution imagery. If I'm shooting just for my Instagram, just the lifestyle scene, I would normally shoot with my iPhone. I once did a comparison and I tried to do the same flatlay with my iPhone and with my camera, and I compared results in the end after editing, and the results were almost the same. So you can as well take very good images with your iPhone. So today we're not going to focus on the camera setting for creating a flatlay. Today we're doing just iPhone and we're going to learn how to use props and how to create your composition with your iPhone flatlay shot. So I normally shoot flatlays at my home studio, but today we are in a studio in central London. I always recommend to use natural light as it gives the best results and gives soft light, and the best is to stand next to the window with your light facing sideways so that you will get very soft shadows because harsh shadows are not very good for a flatlay. So when I work on a flatlay, I start with a product because normally I do have a product or a brand that approached me and I need to create this flatlay for the brand. Or sometimes I will just do a morning like coffee scene at home. Like in this particular case, we're going to pretend like I'm shooting this set, which is like a nice vintage set. I start with the colors of the product that I have. So I always think about it first, and then I will pick up all other colors to match with the colors that I have and to actually add some more color to it. So I prefer to work with plain, simple backgrounds of one color. I really like when they're a little bit, they have this like little vintage look, which I know that many people do it at home themselves, but like the ones I'm using, I bought them. I also have a little coffee table I normally use at home, but obviously we're in a studio now, so we don't have it here. So we're gonna create the setup on the floor, and I'm going to show you the background I have. So it's double-sided, it's white on this side and it's dark on that side. So depending on what I need or depending on the brief I have or what my clients want, I will choose the background. Obviously I have a few more options at home. Like if you don't have anything like this, you can as well use just paper. You can get in paper chase and there are lots of different options. You can get some color options, you can get just white paper, black paper, whatever you feel like. There are two ways to approach a flatlay. Either it could be a very minimalistic setting or it could be quite a busy one. So I normally tend to do a more busy one and to fill in the empty spaces, but it's good to think about the negative space as well, because sometimes you shouldn't overdo or overstyle it. It's good to leave some negative space as well. So we'll put this down. So we're going to use the darker one today. So I don't really like pattern backgrounds because then they will draw all the attention to the background and will take it from the product. So for me, I prefer like a plain simple background because then the product really stands out and all my props just help and will add to it. So my setup today is a coffee scene that you might be having at home. So I will arrange my props around it. So today we're going to shoot this vintage cup. So it will be a lifestyle coffee scene at home. And I will be arranging all my other props around this cup. And because the cup is vintage, I'm going to use some other vintage props. It's really important to create a story when you're doing a flatlay. So before starting to actually arranging the stuff, you need to think about what kind of story you want to tell. For me personally, I love vintage props because they really tell a story. They have this kind of used feel to them and they are great for flatlays. But I also wanted to show you an example of a kind of modern style flatlay. I have like a different coffee cup and it will look completely different, as you can see. So it's the same coffee cup, but it will create a completely different look and feel. Yeah, so one thing to mention, I've already said it before, but it's really important to make sure you don't really have harsh shadows. Like the setup I use at home, I normally shoot next to a window with the light coming sideways so that my shadows are really soft, and we try to recreate this kind of setup here in the studio to make sure that we don't get any harsh shadows. So when choosing location for your flatlay, just keep in mind that you want to avoid harsh shadows. And even if you're shooting at home, just walk around your flat and look for a corner where the shadows are soft, that's just next to the window. And now I'm going to show you how to style and shoot and vintage style flat lay. Okay, since we're shooting with the phone today, so all my setup is on the floor, and obviously I need to arrange everything to be able to go down like this and to take the shot like that. It's much easier to shoot on the floor because if you do it on a table, obviously you will need a chair because you will have to be much higher up. When everything is on the floor, it's much easier just for you to go down a little bit and get your perfect angle. Obviously, we're doing a flat lay, so it has to be flat. You need to make sure you holding your camera straight. And then obviously the grid on the camera, I don't know if you can see it here, like the grid on the camera is really useful. If you're a photographer, you know very well that there is a rule of thirds, that it's really important, and when you're doing a flat lay, it's important as well. So when you're trying to arrange the props that you have, think about the rule of thirds. So obviously you will get those like 4 points, and then try to place the items that you're kind of hero items on one of those 4 points. So when I'm doing a flat lay, I always focus on color, so I pick my color palette. Obviously it depends of what color the product is. Like in this particular case, we're doing this vintage set and it has a bit of pink in it. So I will be looking for other props that have pink, but I will be also looking for complementary colors. Of course, you need to think about the background as well. For example, if the background is dark, you might want to use some lighter props. If your background is white, on the contrary, you might look for darker props. And then obviously I have quite a good selection of props at my home studio, but sometimes, depending on the product, I might have to actually look and buy some other props. So the way I see it, there are two ways to create a flat lay. Either it's a very simple one with leaving a lot of negative space and just really putting all the focus on the subject that you have, or kind of a more busy one when you're really trying to arrange and fill all the space you have. One more thing to remember, if you need to shoot a food or drink, I suggest to add it last minute and do the setup first, because for example, if you're doing a cocktail shot, like the ice will melt, it wouldn't look as good as it's supposed to look. So normally I would like set everything up, do a test shot, make sure I'm happy with my setting, and then I will add my food and drinks last minute. Okay, so now we're going to start to set up the flat lay, and I'm going to show you the props I have and how I'm going to choose the ones I will use. As I'm going for a vintage look, I have like a number of props and I look for them everywhere. There are lots of vintage markets in London and in many other European countries. So I have like a number of those like books and brochures, and I have some kind of postcards, and some of them are even like with stamps. They work really well for vintage kind of style. Okay, let me go grab this. Then I have a selection of vintage sort of scissors. Like I have different ones, so those are like really vintage ones. Then I have this one, which is not really vintage, but like it's a flower scissors. So when I'm adding flowers, I would often add this one. And obviously I have lots of have those little like wooden forks. I have this one, which I like a lot. I brought it from France. Then this, if I'm using butter or anything like it. And then obviously a couple of other like spoons and little forks that will just add to the scene. Okay, so I also have a selection of napkins. And again, I always buy some more if I see the colors that I miss. So some of them are very bright and quite contrasty. Some of them are like more toned down. And then I will pick the ones that I think will work best. Since we're going for a vintage look, I will probably like choose something like this because I think they will complement the scene really nicely. For this particular setting, I'm going to go for this one because it really has this vintage feel to it and it will really add nicely to my scene. And then we also have some croissants and some cherries that I'm going to use for styling. And obviously we're doing like a little nice morning scene, so we want to look at like natural and inviting. So croissants are good. So now I kind of get my selection of props, and now let's get going. So I'm going to start styling. As I said, like there is no tea or coffee in my cup for now. I will try to arrange it all first. So I will take the flowers out. The flowers are really bright, so obviously they will add a lot of attention. That's why I want to start with the flowers first, and then I will see what other elements I have to add later. So here we have the flowers, and I also have some brown paper just in case. It looks like this, because sometimes you want to look at more natural, like you basically just bought the flowers, so you could just add some brown paper to them. So when arranging flowers, I try to kind of group them to make sure like as many flowers as possible are actually visible. And sometimes like I wouldn't keep them all together. Sometimes I will sort of like put them in different places. But in this case, we're doing like a sort of simple flat lay first. So I will keep all the flowers together in this corner. And then let's say I have, okay, we'll rearrange them a little bit, just like this. As you can see, they're sort of pointing like in the direction to the middle of the picture and kind of leading your eyes in. And then so I will probably put, and we'll start arranging my cups. Okay, so now I'm going to start adding food, and obviously croissants, they want to go cold, so there is no problem with it. Like if, for example, I was doing like pancakes or something like this, I would add them much later. So let's put 2, because 1 is not enough, it doesn't fill the plate, or maybe sometimes it's like nice to create layers to make it look really full, so I can actually like add another one. Okay. And then I need to think, okay, what else is missing? Like, what else do I need? It still looks a bit of empty. So I'm going to look in here. So maybe I'm kind of reading and going through old postcards, something like this. So let's just put them here. Okay, so we have this set almost ready. So now I'm going to do a test shot. Okay, so I'm doing it exactly the way it's supposed to be, and then I kind of feel like I want to move this a bit higher up, and I want to move this a little bit. I just want to show you my setup at the moment, how it looks in the camera. Okay, so I want to move the flowers a little bit because I saw there is kind of a gap in here. It's always like good, I always recommend doing a test shot and actually checking that you are happy with all the elements, because sometimes like when you're actually like in the setup, you're so concentrated that you don't really notice little details. And then the worst thing is when you only realize you did something wrong when you start editing, and it's kind of too late. It might be already dark, or it might be like next day, and you can't create the shot anymore because you've eaten your croissants. So I think it's always, you always need to take a test shot, have a look and see if you're happy with everything. Okay, so as we're going for a simple look now, so I think I'm happy with it. I would probably add some kind of cutlery to the scene, maybe just a little spoon. Just like this, and now I'm going to like check if the place of the spoon is good. Because it's kind of facing this way because I don't want the spoon to be out of the shot, and to make sure the spoon is in the frame, I have to get it in. Yeah, it fits. So now the time to get the coffee. Okay, so the coffee is ready, as you can see, it's in the cup. So everything is ready for a shot now. So I'm going to like nail down the composition straight away. Obviously, like if I want to crop something in post-editing, I can do that. But then I have to be like really, really straight. Okay, so I always take a few shots just to be sure. And then My coffee is kind of a bit dark. We didn't add any milk to it. So now we'll try and add some milk and see how the color will change and if I like it more. Okay, so I've added a little bit of milk and I kind of like this shade more now because I think it's matching nicely with the croissants. So I'm going to take another shot with the milk. I'm just going to show you now what we have at the moment. So this is not edited. So we've done our first setting, which is a vintage one, and which is a kind of minimalistic in a way because there were not too many props I was using and not too many elements in the shot. We're not going to talk about editing in this particular session, but I will just mention really quickly that I normally use ViscoCam and Snapseed to edit my iPhone photos, and then I do final tweaks in Instagram. Because Instagram editing tools are much better now than they used to be, and you can really add a bit of structure and you can play around with like shadows and highlights and really improve your photo even with the Instagram tools. Okay, yeah, so what we've done is a kind of a natural style setup at home, and now I'm going to create like a more complex one and more kind of Instagram style and more kind of complicated setup. So I will start adding like those little cherries which look really pretty and I love using them. And actually I use everything that is seasonal. I always try to use seasonal like fruit and vegetables, and I would collect, for example, in autumn I would collect like leaves changing colors. Like during Christmas I will use some nice Christmassy props. They just help you to tell the story better, and I always add this like little nice seasonal touch to your flat lay. So I just wanted to explain, obviously I'm not shooting square because Instagram allows to use portrait and landscape format at the moment, and I feel like portrait format works better for me. I used to shoot in square when Instagram was square, but now I don't do it anymore. And obviously, as you can see, my backdrop is square, so I'm kind of not really using this bit. As you saw in my frame, I'm only using this bit, and I'm creating my sort of portrait 4x5 format setting here. So when I start arranging this, I need to make sure that I'm filling all the frame. And because the cherries will go everywhere, I'm not really worried if one of them will stick out of the frame. So I will just start arranging them like neatly everywhere to make sure I'm happy with the composition. So this one is a little big, so I will break into it. So obviously it doesn't look that natural anymore, but it looks natural to Instagram style. As you can see what I'm doing, I'm basically filling empty spaces. I don't like having any empty spaces when I'm doing like this kind of arrangement. So I'm just looking, trying to kind of nicely add them in. And I really like the color of those particular cherries because they're not too dark, so they really pop on the black background. Okay, now I'm doing, it's not finished yet, but I'm going to do another test shot just to make sure I'm happy with what I have at the moment. So let's see, I feel like my kind of colors are not really connected. Also I can see like some spots that I'm missing cherries. Kind of like this corner is empty. I feel like I need another one here. Then like this kind of corner and another one here. And then I want to sort of connect the colors. So I want to take one of the roses and actually use some of the rose petals, and I will spread them over my flat lay to sort of match the colors nicely. And I have to say that I hate destroying the flowers. So if I don't have to cut them, I try to do everything not to cut them. So I might just like take a couple of petals from here, and then this rose will still be good. And it's the same sort of thing, so I'm just putting those petals in like different places. But I want to create a nice pattern in combination with the cherries that I have. As you can see what I'm doing, I'm actually equally filling all the empty spaces, and if I feel like it's too cluttered, I will actually move the cherries, move the petals, just to make sure I get a bit of both. Okay, and actually there is like this little bit here, and I don't mind that. It just like makes it look more natural. So I kind of want to have another look and see if I'm happy with how my composition looks now. Okay, so it's looking good, it's really full, but I kind of feel like I'm missing a petal. So I'm just going to add another one in here. Then I need to have another look and see. And I feel like I need another cherry somewhere here. Again, it's just about keeping it balanced. It has to be balanced, and like if you have like the colors have to match, and they have to work together, and they have to complement each other. And also I feel like there is kind of a gap like here, so I feel like I want to add something on the postcard, and I feel like a bit left here, so I might just like cut this. I might just put this in here. Okay, so I'm now checking if my composition is perfect, and also I'm tapping on the postcards because this is like the lightest spot that I have, and I want it to be completely in focus. So it's good to tap and to put the focus in here. And I feel like I'm kind of almost happy with it, but like this bit is kind of a little bit empty. And I feel I could add a bit more to it. So I'm just going to add a little bit more on this side. So it's the same, another couple of cherries here, and I might like go with another petal. Okay, so the cherries are done. Okay, I just love when the cherries are pointing in different directions, so it kind of looks more natural. Obviously, if you can say it looks natural about this kind of arrangement. Okay, so I kind of extended this side. I'm going to test again. It's actually looking pretty good now. I feel like I don't have any empty spaces. I'm kind of happy with everything, and I'm not really worried if something crops out, if the kind of half a petal crops out or half a cherry crops out, because I want my frame to be really full. So I'm going to take the shot now. So this is what I have at the moment. It's not edited, and I'm actually pretty happy with what I have. Okay, so editing is personal preference. And I mean, we all have our favorite filters, and we all have our favorite tools that we normally use. As I said, if I edit an iPhone picture, I would normally use ViscoCam, and then I will do little adjustments in Instagram. I also like to use Snapseed because Snapseed is really good when you need to do those like little adjustments. It has this tool called selective adjustment, and then if you're not happy with color or one particular part of your picture, one particular object you have, you can correct the color. You can just put the contrast up or down, and you can put the brightness up and down, which I find really, really useful when you're shooting on mobile. And I like to have a kind of warmer feel to my photos, so I might turn the warmth up a little bit. But then normally I apply a bit of a filter on ViscoCam, and then I will see, because the filter I'm using is kind of warm enough, and then I'm going to see if my white balance is good or if I want to add a bit more warmth to it. Yes, and when I'm working with restaurants, obviously I can't bring my setup in there because sometimes it's a busy and working restaurant and there will be other people actually having their lunch at the same time when I'm shooting. So I always come and look around, and I always ask for a window seat if possible, and then if it's not possible, I'd rather come back next time because I don't want my pictures to look bad just because of the harsh shadows. Okay, so obviously when I'm shooting with my iPhone, and I have iPhone 6, like Flatlay is flat and everything is arranged and everything is in focus because iPhone doesn't have depth of field. But then, for example, I could play around with it, and I could actually, instead of laying down the flowers, I can put them in a vase and they could be standing on the table. So obviously the height would be different. And then if I'm shooting on my iPhone, like obviously it wouldn't make a difference because everything will still be in focus and will not be blurry. And then if I'm using my camera on a tripod, then obviously it will be quite different. Either I need to make sure that everything is in focus, including the flowers, or I need to make sure that the focus is not just on the flowers, because obviously the flowers will be much higher. And then I need to make sure that, like, if I have the product like in my frame, the focus is actually on the product. So you can achieve two different results. If you're shooting with a camera, you can like make some objects more blurry if you put them a bit higher, or you can have everything focused the same way as you're doing with your iPhone. One last point I wanted to touch on is the height of your setting. Obviously, it doesn't matter if you're shooting with your phone because everything else will be perfectly in focus, but it does matter a lot if you're shooting with your camera. And then you can really put your product, like your hero item, a little bit higher than all the other objects that you have, and then this product will be in focus and everything else will be slightly more blurry. Thanks for watching. I hope you will find it useful and my tips will help you to create a perfect flat lay. If you have any further questions or feedback, please leave your comments below. And just to remind you, my Instagram is Ellen Shum.